Before we dive into this chilling tale, make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. The year was 1841, and I was a stagecoach driver for the Continental Stage Company, running the treacherous route between St. Louis and Independence. My name's Samuel Hewitt, though most folks just called me Sam. I'd been driving coaches for near about 7 years by then, and I thought I'd seen everything the frontier had to offer. Bandits, blizzards, broken axles in the middle of nowhere. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on that godforsaken stretch of road through the Blackwood Pass. It started in late September when the air turned crisp and the leaves began their slow descent into rust and gold. The company assigned me and my crew to a new route, a shortcut, they called it, that would shave 2 days off our regular journey. 2 days meant more runs meant more profit. Simple mathematics for the company men sitting comfortable in their St. Louis offices. But for us drivers, it meant venturing into territory we deliberately avoided for years. My crew was small, but dependable. There was Jack Morrison, my shotgun rider, a grizzled veteran with a scarred face and hands steady as iron. He'd fought in the Seminole Wars and had the haunted eyes to prove it. Then there was young Timothy Fletcher, barely 19, who handled the horses during our stops and helped with luggage. The boy was green but eager, always ready with a smile despite the grueling work. And finally, there was Dutch. Nobody knew his real name, our relief driver. A quiet man who spoke little, but could handle a 6-horse team through a thunderstorm without breaking a sweat. The first morning we set out on the new route, everything seemed ordinary enough. The September sun rose, pale and distant, casting long shadows across the prairie grass. Our passengers that run were typical: a merchant heading west, a young couple seeking their fortune in the territories, and an older woman visiting family. They chatted nervously in the coach as we loaded their trunks, unaware of what lay ahead. "You boys ever run this route before?" the merchant asked, leaning out the window as I checked the harnesses. "First time," I replied, tightening a buckle. "Company says it's faster." "Faster don't always mean better," he muttered, settling back inside. I should have paid more attention to those words. We left the station at dawn, the horse's breath forming small clouds in the cool morning air. The road started familiar enough, packed earth worn smooth by countless wagons before us. But by midday, as we approached the foothills where the Blackwood Pass began, the landscape changed. The trees grew denser, their branches reaching across the road like gnarled fingers. The underbrush became thick and wild, untouched by human hands. Even the birdsong seemed to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence. "Don't like the look of this," Jack muttered beside me, his hand unconsciously moving to check his rifle. "Too quiet." "Just trees, Jack," I said, though I felt the unease too. "We'll be through by nightfall." We stopped at a small trading post at the edge of the pass, barely more than a log cabin with a stable. The proprietor, an old-timer named Ezekiel Thorne, came out to greet us. His face was weathered like ancient leather, and his eyes held a wariness that went beyond simple caution. "You boys heading through Blackwood Pass?" he asked, watching as Timothy watered the horses. "That's the plan," I replied. "Company's new shortcut." Ezekiel's expression darkened. He spat tobacco juice into the dirt and shook his head slowly. "Ain't no shortcut worth taking through there, not after dark, especially." Jack climbed down from the coach, interested now. "What's wrong with it?" The old man glanced towards the tree line where the road disappeared into shadow. "The Shawnee won't go near that pass. Haven't for generations. They say something lives in those woods. Something that ain't natural. Hunts at night." "Indians and their superstitions," the merchant scoffed from inside the coach. But Ezekiel wasn't finished. He looked directly at me, his eyes intense. "About 3 years back, Another stage company tried running coaches through there regular-like. Lost 2 drivers. Found one of them 3 days later, wandered out of the woods talking nonsense about eyes in the dark and something following him. Died that same night, they say. The other driver, never found him at all, just his coat torn to shreds and tracks in the mud that didn't belong to no wolf or bear. What kind of tracks? Timothy asked, his young face pale. Big as dinner plates, like a dog's, but wrong somehow. Too wide, claws too long. Ezekiel paused. And there was something else. Folks who live near the pass, the few that remain, they hear things at night, howling that don't sound like any coyote or wolf. And sometimes they hear voices, human voices, calling out from the darkness. But when they look, ain't nobody there. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm afternoon sun. You're saying there's some kind of animal? I'm saying there's something, Ezekiel replied carefully. Something that's been in those woods longer than white men have been in these territories. The old Shawnee chief told me once it's a spirit, a punishment for those who trespass on cursed ground. He called it the black shuck, the hellhound, said it appears as an omen of death. And once it marks you, it don't stop hunting till it claims what it's owed. The young couple had gone silent inside the coach. Even the merchant seemed less certain now. We appreciate the warning, I said, though my mouth had gone dry. But we've got a schedule to keep. We'll push through before dark. Ezekiel nodded slowly, resignation in his eyes. I figured you'd say that. Just remember, if you hear something calling your name in those woods, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't stop the coach once you're in the pass. Not for nothing. Keep those horses running, no matter what you see or hear. He walked back into his cabin without another word, leaving us standing in the dusty yard. The silence stretched out, broken only by the nervous stamping of our horses. Load of horse shit, Dutch finally said, speaking for the first time that day. But even he sounded uncertain. Jack climbed back up beside me, checking his rifle again. Maybe we should wait till morning, push through in daylight. I considered it. The smart thing would be to camp here, start fresh at dawn, but we were already behind schedule, and the company would dock our pay for delays. I was saving for my own land, my own life beyond the endless roads and dust. We keep moving, I decided. It's only about 15 miles through the pass. We'll be on the other side by sunset. That decision, made in the fading afternoon light while standing at the threshold of the Blackwood Pass, would haunt me for the rest of my days. We set off again within the hour. The road narrowed as we entered the pass, the trees pressing close on both sides. Ancient oaks and pines towered above us, their canopy so thick it turned afternoon into twilight. The temperature dropped noticeably, and a damp, earthy smell filled the air, like a cellar that hadn't been opened in years. The horses were skittish. They tossed their heads and pulled against the reins, ears flat back against their skulls. I'd never seen them so spooked by simple forest. Easy now, I murmured, keeping a firm hand on the lines. Easy. But they knew. Animals always know before we do. The road wound deeper into the pass, following a creek bed that ran dark and swift beside us. The sound of rushing water should have been soothing, but instead it seemed to amplify the silence of everything else. No birds, no squirrels, no rustling in the underbrush, just the creak of the coach, the splash of hooves through occasional puddles, and that damn rushing water. We'd been in the pass for maybe an hour when Timothy called out from the back, "Mr. Hewitt, you see that?" I turned in my seat. See what? Thought I saw something moving back in the trees, keeping pace with us. Jack raised his rifle, scanning the forest. Where? There, Timothy pointed, in the shadows, about 50 yards back. Something big. We all looked, but the forest was a maze of shadows and shifting light. If something was there, it was well hidden. Probably just a deer, I said, though my heart was hammering. Deer don't move like that, Timothy whispered. It was stalking, like it was tracking us. Keep your eyes sharp, Jack ordered, his rifle now resting across his knees, finger near the trigger. The merchant stuck his head out the window. What's the holdup? Nothing, sir, I replied, just checking the road ahead. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it now, a weight pressing down on us, a presence watching from the darkness between the trees. The horses felt it too. They were pulling harder now, wanting to run, wanting to escape whatever lurked in those shadows. As we rounded a bend in the road, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in a small clearing beside the path, stood what looked like an old shrine or marker, a cairn of stones stacked man-high, with bones hanging from the trees around it. Animal bones, I told myself. Had to be animal bones. The skull mounted atop the cairn was too large to be a dog's, too predatory to be a deer's. Don't stop, Jack said quietly. Whatever you do, Sam, don't stop the coach. I didn't. I kept the horses moving, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that cairn until we'd passed it. And just as it disappeared behind us, I heard it. A howl, long and low, and filled with a hunger that transcended anything natural. It echoed through the pass, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The horses screamed and bolted, and somewhere in the darkening woods behind us, something began to run. The coach lurched violently as the horses surged forward, their eyes white with terror. I fought the reins, trying to maintain control while the wheels bounced over rocks and ruts that could have snapped an axle clean through. Behind us, that howl continued, rising and falling like some demonic symphony, each note scraping against my nerves like broken glass. Hold on, I shouted to the passengers, though I doubt they heard me over the thunder of hooves and their own screaming. Jack braced himself against the railing, rifle aimed back the way we'd come. His jaw was set tight, but I saw his hands trembling. This was a man who'd faced enemy fire without flinching, and now he looked like he'd seen the gates of hell itself. You see it? I yelled over the chaos. No, but it's there. It's... His words cut off as something crashed through the underbrush, parallel to the road. The sound was massive, like a bull charging through dense forest, but moving faster than any bull I'd ever seen. Trees shook and branches snapped. Jesus Christ, Dutch breathed from somewhere behind us. He'd climbed onto the coach roof to get a better look, which was either brave or foolish. I couldn't decide which. Timothy was clinging to the back of the coach, his young face pale as moonlight. It's keeping up with us, he shouted. Even at full gallop, it's keeping up. That shouldn't have been possible. Our horses were fresh, bred for speed and endurance. Nothing on four legs should have been able to match them through dense forest, while we had the advantage of an open road. But the crashing sounds continued, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always there, always present. The forest became a blur of dark trunks and reaching branches. The creek beside us roared louder as the road descended, the water churning white over its hidden rocks. Spray misted across the coach, cold as winter rain. The sky above, what little I could see through the canopy, was turning deep purple. Twilight was coming fast, too fast. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. The crashing, the breaking branches, the presence in the woods, all of it went silent. Even the horses seemed to sense the change, their panicked gallop slowing to a more manageable pace. I eased back on the reins, my arms burning from the effort of controlling them. Where'd it go? Jack asked, his rifle still raised, barrel sweeping the tree line. I don't know. My voice came out hoarse. Everyone all right back there? Dutch dropped down from the roof with a heavy thud. Define all right. The ladies fainted. the young woman's hysterical, and the merchant's praying loud enough to wake the dead. The horses? I asked Timothy. The boy scrambled forward to check them, running his hands along their sweat-soaked flanks. They're terrified but sound. No injuries I can see. We'd slowed to a trot now, the coach rocking gently as we navigated the darkening road. My heart was still hammering against my ribs, and every shadow seemed to hide something waiting to pounce. The silence was somehow worse than the chaos had been, at least before we knew where it was. Maybe it gave up, Timothy offered weakly. That wasn't no animal that gives up, Jack said. He'd lowered his rifle but kept it across his lap, his eyes never still. That was something hunting, something patient. You really believe that old man's story now? I asked. About the Hellhound? Jack was quiet for a long moment. Finally he said, I've seen a lot of things in my life, Sam. Seen men do terrible things to each other. Seen death in more forms than I care to remember. But I ain't never felt nothing like what I felt back there. That wasn't just fear. It was like something was trying to crawl inside my head, like it knew me. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air, because I'd felt it too. In that moment when the howl first rang out, it wasn't just sound. It was a presence, a malevolent intelligence that had fixed its attention on us specifically, like we'd been marked. The merchant's head appeared at the coach window, his face gray with fear. Driver! We need to turn back, immediately. Can't do that, sir, I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. We're past the midpoint. Only way out is forward. Then stop. We'll make camp. Wait for daylight. No! The word came out harder than I intended. Old Ezekiel said not to stop in the pass. Not for nothing. And right now, I'm inclined to trust his judgment. This is madness. We're being hunted by something out there. Which is exactly why we keep moving, Jack interjected. Sitting still makes us easy prey. The merchant retreated back into the coach, his prayers resuming with renewed fervor. We continued at a steady pace, the road winding ever deeper into the pass. Full darkness was maybe an hour away now, and I cursed myself again for not waiting till morning. 2 days' profit wasn't worth this. Nothing was worth this. Sam, Dutch called from the back. The water. What about it? It's changed direction. We were following it downhill, but now... Listen. I pulled the horses to a near stop, straining my ears. He was right. The creek that had been rushing beside us, heading downstream, now sounded like it was flowing uphill. The sound came from ahead of us and behind us simultaneously, as if the very geography had shifted. That's not possible, Timothy whispered. None of this is possible, Jack replied, but it's happening just the same. A new sound emerged from the forest. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving through the underbrush with a measured pace, not running now, walking, like it had all the time in the world. And then cutting through the twilight air came a voice. Samuel. It was my name, spoken in a tone I almost recognized. It sounded like my brother's voice, my brother who'd died of fever 3 years prior. The sound came from somewhere to our left, back in the trees. Samuel, help me. My hands tightened on the reins. That's not real, I said, though my voice shook. That's not him. Don't listen to it, Jack warned. Remember what the old man said. Don't answer. But the voice came again, more desperate now. Samuel, please. I'm lost. I can't find my way. Tears stung my eyes. It sounded so much like David. The same inflection, the same slight lisp on the S sounds that he'd had since childhood. For one terrible moment, I wanted to stop the coach, wanted to run into those trees and find him. Jack's hand clamped down on my arm. It ain't him, Sam. Whatever that thing is, it's using your memories against you. Don't let it. The voice changed then, growing distorted and wrong, like multiple voices speaking in unison. Samuel! And then it laughed. A sound so filled with malice and dark joy that it made my stomach turn. Jack Morrison? A new voice called out. This one was different. A woman's voice, sweet and sad. Jack, why did you leave me? Jack went rigid beside me, his face drained of color. Mary? He whispered. Who's Mary? I asked. My wife. She died 10 years ago. Cholera. His voice was hollow. How does it know? How does it know her voice? The thing in the woods laughed again, and this time other voices joined it. The young couple in the coach began screaming as they heard their own names called out. Timothy sobbed openly as something that sounded like his dead mother called for him. Faster, Dutch urged from behind us. Sam, whatever you do, move faster. I snapped the reins, pushing the horses into a canter despite the dangerous terrain. The voices followed us, always keeping pace, sometimes calling from one side of the road, sometimes the other. They grew more insistent, more desperate, more angry when we didn't respond. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Ahead in the middle of the road stood a figure. It was shaped like a man, but wrong in ways I couldn't quite articulate. Too tall, perhaps, or too thin. Its proportions were off, like a child's drawing of a person brought to terrible life. As we drew closer, I realized it was facing away from us, standing perfectly still. What is that? Timothy asked. Run it down, Dutch said. Don't slow down. But as we approached, the figure began to turn, slowly, deliberately, and I knew with absolute certainty that I did not want to see its face. The horses, bless them, had the same instinct. They veered to the side without my guidance, giving the figure a wide berth. As we passed, I caught a glimpse of it in the fading light. It had no face, just smooth, pale skin where features should have been. But I felt it watching us nonetheless. And then it opened its mouth, a gaping maw that shouldn't have existed on that blank expanse, and howled. The sound was the same as before, but louder. So loud it felt like my skull might crack from the pressure. The horses screamed and bolted again, but this time I didn't fight them. This time I wanted to run just as badly as they did. Behind us, the crashing through the forest resumed, but now it was louder, closer, and accompanied by a sound that haunted my nightmares for years after. The clicking of claws on stone. Enormous claws, striking the road surface as something pursued us with single-minded determination. It's on the road, Timothy shrieked. It's on the road behind us. Jack fired his rifle blindly into the darkness behind us. The flash illuminated the forest for a split second, and in that brief moment of light, I saw it. The Hellhound. It was massive, bigger than any wolf, bigger than a bear. Its fur was black as pitch, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its eyes burned red like hot coals, and when it opened its jaws, I saw teeth longer than my fingers. But worst of all were its proportions. The body was canine, yes, but stretched and warped, as if something had taken the concept of a dog and twisted it into something nightmarish. Its front legs were too long, its back hunched, and its head was almost human in intelligence. In those burning eyes I saw not animal instinct, but deliberate, malevolent intent. It was toying with us. Jack fired again and again, but the bullets seemed to pass through it without effect. Or perhaps they struck true and simply didn't matter. The thing never slowed, never flinched. "The bridge," Dutch shouted. "There's a bridge ahead." I saw it through the gloom, a wooden structure spanning a ravine where the creek plunged into darkness. The bridge was narrow, barely wide enough for the coach, but it was our only chance. "Hold on," I screamed, and drove the horses straight for it. The wheels hit the bridge planks with a tremendous crash. The entire structure groaned and swayed under our weight. I heard timbers cracking, nails pulling free. Behind us, the Hellhound's claws scrabbled on wood as it followed us onto the bridge. We were halfway across when the back of the bridge collapsed. The sound of splintering wood mixed with an inhuman howl of rage. I risked a glance back and saw the creature tumbling into the ravine, its red eyes still fixed on us as it fell into darkness. And then we were on solid ground again, the horses still running, the bridge gone behind us. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We just listened to the thunder of hooves and our own ragged breathing. Is it gone?" Timothy finally asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly, "but we're not stopping to find out." From somewhere far behind us, deep in the ravine, came one last howl. A promise, a warning. This wasn't over. We rode in silence for the next hour, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hooves and the creaking of the coach. Full darkness had fallen now, and I'd lit the coach lanterns. Small circles of yellow light that barely pushed back the oppressive blackness surrounding us. The forest felt like it was closing in, the trees leaning over the road as if trying to smother us. My arms ached from controlling the horses. My throat was raw from breathing hard, but worse than any physical discomfort was the feeling that we were still being watched. That red-eyed gaze burning into the back of my skull, patient and hungry. "How much farther?" the merchant called from inside the coach. His voice had lost its earlier indignation, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. "Should be out of the pass within 2 hours," I replied, though truthfully I wasn't sure anymore. The road markers I'd been counting on were absent, and the landscape all looked the same in the darkness. Endless trees, endless shadows. Jack hadn't spoken since the bridge. He sat beside me, rifle across his knees, staring into the darkness with eyes that didn't blink often enough. Every few minutes, he'd turn sharply, as if he'd heard something, but when I asked, he'd just shake his head. "Jack," I said quietly, "you all right?" "No," he replied after a long pause. "No, I'm not all right, Sam. That thing, it knew Mary's voice. Her exact voice, the way she used to call for me when she'd wake from nightmares." He finally looked at me, and I saw something broken in his expression. How does something like that exist? I had no answer for him. Behind us, I heard Dutch and Timothy talking in low voices. Timothy was crying softly, and Dutch was trying to comfort him in his gruff way. The passengers had gone quiet too, either sleeping or too traumatized to speak. I couldn't blame them. Part of me wanted to curl up and weep like Timothy was doing. But I was the driver. I had to keep us moving. The road began to climb slightly, following the curve of a hill. The forest thinned here, giving us a brief view of the sky. Stars were beginning to appear, cold and distant. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief. Open sky meant we were closer to leaving the deep woods. Then I noticed something wrong. The stars weren't right. The constellations I'd used for navigation on my entire life were different, shifted, as if we'd somehow traveled hundreds of miles in the wrong direction, or as if the very heavens had rearranged themselves. "Dutch," I called back, "you know the stars. Look up and tell me what you see." I heard him shift position, then a long silence. "That's not right," he finally said, his voice troubled. "That's not right at all. The North Star should be, but it ain't. Sam, where the hell are we?" "Same road we've been on," I replied, though doubt gnawed at me. "Then why don't the stars match?" A thought occurred to me, one I didn't want to voice but couldn't ignore. What if we hadn't escaped at the bridge? What if we'd fallen with the Hellhound into that ravine, and everything since then had been some kind of dying dream? Or worse, what if we'd crossed some threshold when we entered the pass, and we weren't quite in the world we knew anymore? "Maybe it's just the angle," Timothy offered weakly. "Maybe we're turned around." "Maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. The road descended back into heavy forest, and the stars disappeared behind the canopy again. Almost immediately, I felt the oppressive presence return. It was like being underwater, pressure building in my ears and chest. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was just the wind through the trees. But wind doesn't form words. These did. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once in a susurrus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Turn back, lost, hungry, help us, join us. Turn back. You hear that? Jack asked, his knuckles white on his rifle. Yes. We're not alone out here, Sam. I don't mean the Hellhound. I mean... He gestured vaguely at the forest. This place is wrong. The whole damn place is wrong. It's like the land itself is sick. He was right. I'd been feeling it too, but hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. The forest wasn't just dangerous. It was malevolent. Every tree, every shadow, every breath of air felt hostile. This was a place where the natural order had been corrupted by something old and evil. A scream cut through the whispers, high-pitched and terrified. It came from inside the coach. I pulled the horses to a stop, my heart hammering. What's happening? The young woman burst out of the coach door, nearly falling in her panic. Her husband followed, trying to calm her, but she was hysterical. It was in there, she shrieked. It was in the coach with us. What was? Dutch demanded, climbing down with his pistol drawn. The dog. That horrible dog. It was sitting right across from me, just staring with those red eyes. Her husband looked shaken but confused. Darling, there was nothing there. You were dreaming. I wasn't dreaming. It was right there. It spoke to me. What did it say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She turned those wide, terrified eyes on me. It said it knows where we live. It knows where we're going. And even if we escape the past tonight, it will find us. It will always find us. Because we're marked now. A heavy silence fell over our group. The whispers in the forest seemed to grow louder, more insistent. Get back in the coach, I said firmly. We're not stopping. We're going to keep moving until we're out of this place. But what if it's already in there? She whimpered. Then it would have killed you already, Jack said bluntly. Whatever you saw, or think you saw, it was just trying to scare you. We can't let it win. Reluctantly, the couple climbed back inside. The older woman hadn't woken through all the commotion, whether from exhaustion or shock, I couldn't tell. The merchant sat rigid in his seat, clutching a small Bible and moving his lips in silent prayer. We started moving again, but the mood had shifted from fear to something darker, despair. Because the young woman had voiced what we'd all been thinking. Even if we survived the night, even if we made it out of Blackwood Pass, would we ever truly be free? Or had we indeed been marked, claimed by something that would hunt us to the ends of the earth? Sam, Timothy called from the back, his voice shaking. I think there's something following us again. Where? I can't see it, but I feel it. Like something's walking behind the coach, just out of sight. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't see anything in the darkness beyond our small circles of lantern light. But I felt it too. A presence, close and getting closer. The air grew colder, our breath misting despite the mild September weather. The horses felt it most of all. Their ears were flat against their heads, their eyes rolling white. They wanted to bolt again, but I held them to a steady trot. Losing control now, in full darkness, on an unfamiliar road, would be suicide. It's playing with us, Jack said quietly, like a cat with a mouse. It could have killed us at the bridge if it wanted to. Could have torn that coach apart a dozen times over. But it's not interested in a quick kill. It wants us terrified. Why? I asked. Because fear tastes better. The words came from Dutch, and when I glanced back, his face was grim. I've heard stories from trappers up north, native legends about spirit animals that feed on terror. The more afraid their prey is, the sweeter the meal. I always thought it was nonsense, but he trailed off, looking into the forest. Following his gaze, I saw movement between the trees. Not the massive form of the Hellhound, but something else. Shapes, humanoid but wrong, keeping pace with the coach. There were dozens of them, flickering in and out of visibility like shadows cast by a dying fire. "Don't look at them," Jack warned. "I don't think they're real. Or if they are, they're not what we're really running from. They're just echoes, after images of other people who died in these woods." "How do you know?" Timothy asked. "Because I recognized some of them. That one there," he pointed to a shape limping alongside the road, "that's wearing the uniform of a continental soldier. That's Revolutionary War era. And that woman in the old-fashioned dress. This place has been claiming victims for a long, long time." The realization hit me like a physical blow. We weren't the Hellhound's first prey, probably not even its 100th. How many others had traveled this road? How many had heard the voices of their dead, loved ones calling from the darkness? How many had seen those red eyes in their final moments? A new sound joined the cacophony. Scratching. Something was scratching at the sides of the coach. Long scrapes of claw on wood. The passengers inside began screaming again. "It's under us," the merchant shouted. "It's under the coach." I looked down but saw nothing. Yet the scratching continued, moving from one side to the other, sometimes from underneath, sometimes from above. It was impossible. There was nowhere for a creature that size to hide. But impossible had lost all meaning tonight. "What do you think is causing all this?" I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. But Timothy heard me. "Maybe we angered it somehow, crossed into its territory without permission. Or maybe..." He paused, looking sick. "Maybe this is just what it does. Maybe this is its nature, to torment, to terrify, to hunt. Not because we did anything wrong, but because we were unlucky enough to be here." The thought was somehow more terrifying than the idea that we'd transgressed some sacred boundary. At least transgression implied rules, logic, a way to make amends. But pure malevolence? That was something you couldn't reason with, couldn't escape. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Everything stopped. The whispers died away. The shadowy figures between the trees vanished. Even the horses calmed, their panicked breathing easing into something closer to normal. The oppressive presence that had been suffocating us simply disappeared. We rode in stunned silence, hardly daring to believe it could be over. "Are we through?" Timothy asked hopefully. "Are we past it?" I studied the road ahead, the forest around us. It did feel different, less hostile. The trees no longer seemed to lean over us quite so menacingly. The air tasted cleaner, less heavy with corruption. "I think, maybe," I started to say. Then Jack grabbed my arm. "Stop the coach." "What? Why?" "Just stop. Now." I pulled the horses to a halt. Jack climbed down, rifle in hand, and walked ahead of the coach. He stopped about 20 feet in front of us, staring at something on the ground. "Sam," he called back, his voice hollow. "Come look at this." I set the brake and climbed down, my legs shaky. Dutch followed. When we reached Jack, I saw what had made him stop. There in the dirt of the road were tracks. Massive paw prints, each one the size of a dinner plate, with claw marks extending far beyond the pads. The tracks were fresh, so fresh that water was still seeping into them from the damp earth. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The tracks came from ahead of us. They crossed the road, circled around where the coach now stood, then continued back into the forest. We hadn't been following the creature. It had been ahead of us the entire time, waiting, watching, herding us like sheep towards some destination of its choosing. "Oh God," Timothy whispered. "If it's ahead of us and behind us." "We're surrounded," Dutch finished grimly. "We've been surrounded this whole time." From the forest on both sides of the road came a low, rumbling growl. Not the howl from before, but something more intimate, more threatening. The sound a predator makes when it's finally ready to pounce. And in the darkness between the trees, dozens of pairs of red eyes opened, staring at us with ancient hunger. We'd been wrong, so terribly wrong. It wasn't one hellhound hunting us. It was a pack. For a moment, we all stood frozen, staring at those glowing red eyes that surrounded us on all sides. I counted at least a dozen pairs, maybe more, hidden in the deeper shadows. They didn't blink, didn't move, just watched us with that terrible patient intelligence. "Back to the coach," Jack said quietly, his rifle trembling in his hands. Slow. No sudden movements. We began retreating, step by careful step. The eyes tracked our movement, but didn't advance. It was like they were giving us a chance to run, not out of mercy, but because they enjoyed the chase more than an easy kill. "Samuel," my brother's voice rang out from the darkness, clear as day. "Samuel, don't leave me, please." My foot caught on a rock and I stumbled. Dutch grabbed my arm, steadying me. "It's not him," he hissed. "Keep moving." But the voices multiplied. Mary calling for Jack. Timothy's mother weeping and begging him to come to her. The young woman's voice emanating from the trees, calling to her husband who stood beside the coach. Each voice perfect, each one a knife twisting in our hearts. "Help us, Samuel. We're trapped here. They won't let us go." "It hurts, Jack. It hurts so much. Why won't you help me?" "I'm scared, Timothy. So scared. Please come find me." Timothy broke first. With a strangled cry, he turned and ran toward the tree line where his mother's voice was calling. Dutch lunged after him, tackling the boy to the ground just before he reached the shadows. "It's not her," Dutch roared, pinning Timothy down as the boy struggled and sobbed. "Whatever's using her voice wants you dead. Fight it." The eyes moved closer, slowly, deliberately, emerging from between the trees, and with them came the bodies, massive, grotesque shapes that barely resembled dogs anymore. They were nightmares given flesh, each one unique in its horror. The largest stood nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, its black fur matted and patchy, revealing skin that looked like charred leather underneath. Its jaws hung open, impossibly wide, strings of saliva dripping from teeth that were too long, too numerous. But its eyes were the worst, burning red, yes, but also distinctly aware. This wasn't just an animal. This was something that understood exactly what it was doing. Another was smaller but no less terrifying. Its front legs were bent at wrong angles, forcing it to move in a skittering, spider-like gait. Its head twisted completely backward on its neck, and as I watched in horror, it rotated forward again with a wet cracking sound. A third had what looked like human hands instead of front paws, the fingers elongated and tipped with black claws. It used these hands to pull itself forward, dragging its malformed hind legs behind it. "Get in the coach," I shouted. "Everyone, now!" We scrambled back, Dutch dragging a still sobbing Timothy. Jack fired his rifle at the nearest creature. The shot echoed through the forest, and I saw the bullet strike true, hitting the massive leader in the chest. The creature didn't even flinch. The bullet hole sealed itself instantly, flesh knitting back together like water flowing into water. "They can't be killed," Jack's voice cracked with desperation. "God help us. They can't be killed." We reached the coach. The passengers were screaming inside, their faces pressed against the windows as they witnessed the pack's approach. I grabbed Timothy and shoved him up into the driver's seat, then climbed up after him. "Hold on to something," I yelled, releasing the brake. I cracked the whip, and the horses, needing no encouragement, bolted forward, straight toward the pack. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought they would stand their ground, that we'd collide with those massive bodies and be torn apart. But at the last second, they scattered. Not out of fear, I realized, but because they were letting us pass. This was all still part of their game. We thundered down the road, the coach bouncing violently over ruts and stones. Behind us, I heard the howling start again. But this time it was a chorus. Multiple voices singing their demonic song in harmony. The sound seemed to shake the very earth, and I felt it resonating in my bones. "They're following," Dutch shouted from the back. "All of them." I glanced behind and saw the pack in pursuit, their red eyes bouncing in the darkness like hellish fireflies. But they weren't running at full speed. They were pacing us, staying just close enough to keep us panicked, but not close enough to catch us. Not yet. "There's something ahead," Timothy yelled, pointing. I turned forward and saw it, a structure looming out of the darkness. An old church, abandoned by the look of it, its white paint peeling and its steeple listing to one side. But it was shelter, walls between us and the pack. "We can't stop," Jack protested. The old man said, "We don't have a choice." I cut him off. "Those horses can't run forever, and neither can we. At least in there we can defend ourselves." I didn't wait for agreement. I steered the horses toward the church, pulling them to a halt in front of the sagging steps. "Everyone out. Into the church. Move." The passengers needed no encouragement. They burst from the coach and ran for the church doors. Dutch and Timothy followed, helping the elderly woman who'd finally woken from her shock-induced stupor. Jack and I were the last to leave, and as we did, I heard the howling grow suddenly louder. The pack had stopped running. They stood in a semicircle around the church, red eyes glowing in the darkness, watching, waiting. We reached the church doors, old wood, rotted in places but still solid. I threw them open and we stumbled inside. The interior was pitch black, smelling of mold and decay. Timothy fumbled with a lantern while I and Jack pushed a heavy wooden pew against the door. "Windows!" the merchant shouted. "They can come through the windows." He was right. The church had 6 tall windows, 3 on each side, their glass long since broken out. Dutch and Timothy began dragging more pews to block them, while Jack and I reinforced the door. The lantern finally caught, casting dancing shadows across the ruined church interior. The pews we hadn't moved were covered in dust and rat droppings. The altar at the far end was overturned, and the crucifix above it hung upside down. Whether that had been done deliberately or was simply the result of decay, I couldn't tell. But it felt like a bad omen. "Do you think they'll come in?" the young woman whispered, clutching her husband. Before anyone could answer, something heavy struck the door. The impact shook the entire frame, and I heard wood beginning to splinter. Another impact. Another. The creatures were testing our defenses, probing for weakness. "The windows!" someone screamed. I spun and saw one of the creatures, the one with human hands, pulling itself through a window we hadn't finished blocking. Its elongated fingers gripped the sill, and it hauled its twisted body forward with unnatural strength. Jack fired his rifle. The bullet took the creature in the face, snapping its head back. For a moment it hung there, stunned. Then it turned its head back toward us, the bullet wound already healing, and grinned. Actually grinned, with a mouth full of too many teeth arranged in a mockery of a human smile. Dutch grabbed a broken piece of pew and swung it like a club, catching the creature across the skull. This had more effect. The creature let out a shriek of pain and retreated back through the window. But I saw others approaching the remaining openings. "They're coming in!" Timothy shouted. "They're all coming in!" The merchant was curled in a corner, babbling prayers. The elderly woman had fainted again. The young couple held each other, waiting for death. And then, as suddenly as the attack began, it stopped. The creatures withdrew from the windows, The pounding on the door ceased. An eerie silence fell over the church, broken only by our ragged breathing and the merchant's mumbled prayers. "Why'd they stop?" Timothy asked. "I don't know," Jack replied, "but I don't like it." We waited, weapons ready, every nerve strung tight. Minutes passed. The silence stretched on, oppressive and wrong. Then a voice came from outside. My voice. "Jack," it called. "Dutch? Timothy? I need help out here. I'm hurt. Please, someone help me." It was perfect. The exact tone, the exact inflection I would use if I were genuinely injured. I looked at the others and saw their confusion. "That's not me," I said quickly. "I'm right here. Don't listen to it." "Samuel," the voice called again, adding a note of pain. "Please, I can't walk. Something's broken. Don't leave me out here." "Ignore it," Jack ordered. "Everyone stay." "I'm right here," another voice interrupted. Jack's voice, coming from a different direction outside. "Sam, Dutch, I'm at the back door. Let me in before they get me." "That's not me," Jack shouted. "Nobody open anything." But the voices multiplied. Soon there were dozens of them. All of our voices calling from different parts of the church, begging to be let in, claiming to be the real person, while the one inside was an imposter. "Which one's real?" the young woman sobbed. "How do we know which is real?" "We're all real," I said desperately. "We're all right here. Don't!" Timothy screamed. I turned and saw him backing away from Dutch, his face white with terror. Your eyes are wrong." I looked at Dutch. In the flickering lantern light, for just a moment, I thought I saw his eyes flash red. But when I blinked, they were normal again. "Tim, it's me," Dutch said, holding up his hands. "It's playing tricks on our minds. You know me. You know I'm real." "Prove it," Timothy said, his voice shaking. "Tell me something only Dutch would know." Dutch hesitated, and in that hesitation, doubt spread like poison. "He can't prove it," Jack said, raising his rifle toward Dutch, "because maybe he's not Dutch. Maybe Dutch is one of them now." "Don't be a fool," Dutch snapped. "I'm right here, same as I've been all night." "Are you?" Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. "How do we know you didn't get replaced when we got separated? How do we know any of us are who we say we are?" This was exactly what the creatures wanted, I realized. They couldn't break through our physical defenses, so they were breaking us down mentally, turning us against each other, making us do their work for them. "Stop it," I shouted. "All of you, stop. This is what they want. They want us to kill each other. Or maybe you want us distracted," Jack said, swinging the rifle toward me. "Maybe you're the one who's been replaced, Sam. Maybe that's why you led us to this church. To trap us for them." "Jack, listen to yourself. You know me." I thought I did. But that thing knew Mary's voice. Knew exactly how to mimic her. What's to stop it from mimicking you? The situation was spiraling out of control. We stood in a circle, all of us facing each other with weapons raised, each convinced that at least one person in the group wasn't human anymore. A crash from above made us all jump. Something was on the roof, moving from one end to the other. Tiles fell, shattering on the floor. Dust and debris rained down from the rafters. Then a voice came from directly above us, the voice of the young woman, though she stood right beside her husband. "They're all real," the voice said. "You're the only fake one, darling. The rest of them know. They're going to kill you." The young man turned to his wife, eyes wild with fear and confusion. Are you really you?" "Of course I'm me," she cried. "Please, you have to believe." "Liar!" he screamed and lunged at her. Jack and I grabbed him, pulling him back as he thrashed and raved. "She's one of them. I can see it. Her face is wrong. Her face is..." A beam fell from the ceiling, barely missing us. More tiles crashed down, The entire structure was coming apart around us. "The church is collapsing," Dutch yelled. "We need to get out." "But the creatures," Timothy started. "Would you rather be crushed?" Dutch was already moving toward the door, shoving aside the pew we'd used to barricade it. Jack and I exchanged a glance. We had no choice. We couldn't fight the creatures, couldn't trust each other, and couldn't stay in a building that was falling apart. Our only option was to run. Again. Dutch threw open the door, and we burst out into the night. The pack was waiting, arranged in a loose circle around the church. But they didn't attack. They just watched as we scrambled back to the coach, their red eyes gleaming with something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. We'd played right into their hands. They'd herded us into the church, broken us mentally, and now they had us right where they wanted us, exhausted, paranoid, and out of options. I climbed onto the driver's seat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the reins. The others piled in, no longer caring about propriety or order. We just needed to move, to keep moving, because the moment we stopped... "Go!" Jack screamed. "Sam, go!" I snapped the whip, and the horses lunged forward. The pack parted to let us through, but this time they followed closer, much closer. I could hear their panting breath, hear their claws on the road, hear their jaws snapping mere feet from the back of the coach. One of them, the massive leader, pulled alongside us. It ran with impossible grace for something so large, its burning eyes level with mine. And as I watched in horror, its face began to change. The muzzle shortened, the fur receded, the features shifted and rearranged themselves, until I was looking at my own face, running on that monster's body. It smiled at me, my smile, but wrong, too wide, too many teeth. Then it spoke with my voice. "You can't outrun yourself, Samuel. No matter how far you go, no matter how fast you run, you'll never escape what you are, what we all are in the dark." It dropped back, letting the coach pull ahead, but its words echoed in my mind, more terrifying than any howl, because I realized then what we were really facing. These weren't just monsters hunting for food. They were something far worse, a reflection of humanity's darkest nature, given form and set loose in the world. They were fear made flesh, guilt made manifest. Every terrible thing we'd ever done or thought or been come back to haunt us. And as the pack continued their pursuit through the endless night of Blackwood Pass, I understood with horrible certainty that old Ezekiel had been right. Once marked, we would never be free. The hunt would never end. The horses were dying. I could feel it in the way they stumbled, hear it in their labored breathing. We'd pushed them beyond any reasonable limit, and still the pack pursued us through the darkness. How long had we been running? Hours? Days? Time had lost all meaning in Blackwood Pass. Then ahead in the distance I saw something that made my heart leap. Lights. Real lights, not the burning red eyes of the Hellhounds, but the warm, yellow glow of lanterns. A settlement. Civilization. "There!" I shouted, pointing. "Up ahead!" The pack saw it too. Their howling intensified, becoming frantic, almost desperate. They surged forward with renewed vigor, closing the distance. The leader, the one that had worn my face, lunged at the rear wheel, jaws snapping. "They're trying to stop us!" Dutch yelled, firing his pistol blindly into the mass of bodies behind us. I understood. They didn't want us to reach those lights. Whatever power they held in this cursed forest, it couldn't extend into that settlement. We just had to make it a little farther. The horses found strength from somewhere deep within themselves, that final reserve animals find when death is the only alternative to running. They surged forward, foam flying from their mouths, their eyes wild with terror. 200 yards. 100. 50. I could see details now, a small town, maybe a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads. People were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. They carried torches and rifles. The pack was right on us, so close I could smell the rot on their breath, feel the heat from their unnatural bodies. The leader's jaws closed around the back corner of the coach, and I heard wood splintering. 20 yards. 10. We crossed into the town, passing between the first two buildings, and the pack stopped. As if they'd hit an invisible wall, they skidded to a halt at the town's edge. Their howls turned to something that sounded almost like rage, almost like pain. I pulled the horses up and we all turned to look back. The creatures stood in a line at the boundary, their red eyes blazing with frustration and fury. But they didn't cross. Couldn't cross. Something about this place held them at bay. As I watched, they began to retreat, backing slowly into the shadows. The leader, still wearing traces of my features in its twisted face, stared at me with an intensity that made my blood freeze. "This isn't over," it said with my voice. "We'll be waiting, always waiting." Then they were gone, melting into the darkness as if they'd never been. But I knew better. They were still out there, just beyond the light, patient as death itself. The townspeople surrounded us, their faces full of concern and curiosity. An older man who introduced himself as Mayor Silas Blackwood helped us down from the coach. Our legs barely held us. We were covered in sweat and dust, our eyes hollow from terror. "Blackwood Pass," the mayor said grimly when I explained where we'd come from. "You're the first coach to make it through in 3 years. The last ones." He shook his head. "Well, you're lucky to be alive." Lucky. The word felt obscene. They took us to the town's small inn, fed us, gave us rooms. The passengers were in shock. The elderly woman had to be carried to bed, still unconscious. The young couple clung to each other, not speaking. The merchant sat alone, staring at nothing, his Bible clutched so tightly his knuckles were white. My crew gathered in my room once the townspeople had left us alone. We sat in silence for a long time, each of us processing what we'd survived. "What do we tell the company?" Timothy finally asked. His voice was hoarse from screaming, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. "The truth," I said. "We tell them the pass isn't safe, that it needs to be closed permanently." "They won't believe us," Dutch said flatly. "They'll think we're drunk or insane. Hell, maybe we are insane." Jack hadn't said anything since we'd stopped. He sat by the window, staring out into the darkness. "They're still out there," he said quietly. "I can feel them, watching, waiting." "But they can't come into town," I said, trying to sound confident. "Whatever protection this place has won't last forever," Jack finished. "That thing said this wasn't over, Sam. And I believe it. I think we're marked now. Like that woman in the coach said, no matter where we go, part of us will always be in those woods, and part of those woods will always be with us." He was right. I could feel it too, a cold presence at the back of my mind, like fingers resting on my shoulder. The Hellhounds had touched something inside us, something we couldn't wash away or leave behind. "So what do we do?" Timothy asked, and he sounded so young, so lost. "We survive," I said. "We keep living. We tell our story even if no one believes us. And we watch for the signs. Because if they do come for us again..." I left the sentence unfinished. I didn't have an answer for what we'd do. Mayor Blackwood visited us the next morning. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. "There's something you should know," he said, "about this town, about why the creatures can't enter." He led us to the town square, to a monument I hadn't noticed the night before. It was a stone marker, weathered and old, covered in symbols I didn't recognize, not English, not any Native American writing I'd seen. They seemed to shift and writhe when I looked at them directly. "This town was founded on an old battleground," the mayor explained. Not a human battle, something older. According to legend, this was where light fought darkness before men walked these lands. The boundary is still here, still holding. As long as this stone stands, nothing from the pass can cross into our territory. How long has it been here? Dutch asked. No one knows. It was here when the first settlers arrived 100 years ago. And it'll be here long after we're gone, God willing. But as he spoke, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was a crack in the stone. Small, barely visible, but definitely there. And it was growing. I didn't mention it. What good would it do? We stayed in the town for 3 days, recovering our strength and replacing the coach's damaged wheel. The company sent word that we were to return to St. Louis by the main road, the long route, the safe route. The Blackwood Pass shortcut was officially closed until further investigation. Further investigation. As if any investigation could explain what we'd witnessed. On our last night in town, I stood outside the inn, looking back towards the pass. I couldn't see the forest from here, but I felt it. That pull, that presence. And I knew with absolute certainty that some part of me would always be running down that dark road, pursued by red eyes and impossible horrors. Jack joined me, lighting a pipe. We stood in silence for a while. Do you think they got what they wanted? He asked finally. The Hellhounds. What do you mean? They could have killed us 12 times over, but they didn't. They chased us, terrified us, broke us down. But they let us live. Why? I'd been wondering the same thing. Maybe, I said slowly. Dead men can't spread stories. But survivors tell tales. And every person who hears about Blackwood Pass, who feels that little shiver of fear, who decides not to travel that road. Maybe that's what they feed on. Not our bodies. Our fear. And not just ours. Everyone who hears what happened to us. Jack nodded slowly. So by surviving, by telling our story, we're giving them exactly what they want. Maybe by telling our story, we save others from making the same mistake we did. Either way, Jack said, we'll never be free of them. Not really. He was right. I knew it in my bones. The Hellhounds had claimed something from us that night. Not our lives, but something perhaps more precious. Our certainty. Our belief that the world was rational and knowable. Our ability to feel truly safe in the dark. We left at dawn the next morning, taking the long road back to St. Louis. The journey was uneventful, almost boring, but every night when we made camp, I would lie awake, listening to the darkness. Listening for the sound of paws on earth. Listening for voices calling my name. They never came, but I knew they were out there, waiting, patient, eternal. The company tried to dismiss our story, of course. They called it mass hysteria, suggested we'd been drinking, implied we were trying to cover up for some mistake or mishap. But word spread anyway. Drivers refused to take the Blackwood Pass route. Passengers demanded alternate paths. The shortcut that was supposed to save 2 days became a death sentence no one would risk. After a month, I quit the Continental Stage Company. Couldn't do it anymore. Every time I climbed onto a driver's seat, every time we approached a dark stretch of road, I felt them watching, waiting for their moment. Jack left too. Last I heard, he'd moved to a city, New York or Boston, somewhere with lights that never went out, where darkness could never really take hold. Timothy went back to his family farm and never spoke of that night again. Dutch disappeared entirely. I like to think he found some peace somewhere, but I'm not sure any of us ever will. The young couple from the coach, they separated within 6 months, couldn't look at each other without remembering. The merchant became a recluse, never leaving his home after dark. The elderly woman died in her sleep 2 weeks after we arrived back in St. Louis. Peacefully, they said, but I wonder if she found peace. or if the Hellhounds finally came for her in her dreams. As for me, I bought a small farm on the outskirts of St. Louis. I married, had children, tried to build a normal life. But some nights, when the wind howls through the trees and the shadows grow long, I hear them. The scratching at the door, the voice calling my name, the patient, eternal hunger of things that should not exist but do. And I know that somewhere in the darkness of Blackwood Pass, the pack still runs, still hunts, still waits, because that's what hellhounds do. They hunt, they terrify, they mark their prey and never ever let go. We survived that night in 1841, but in a way, we never really left those woods, and we never will. End of Section 5, Section 6. Closing scene. Final reflection. 20 years have passed since that night in Blackwood Pass. 20 years of trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. A shared delusion brought on by exhaustion and fear. 20 years of lying to myself. Because the truth is, I remember every detail with a clarity that shouldn't be possible after 2 decades. The way those red eyes burned in the darkness. The sound of my brother's voice calling from the woods. The feeling of being hunted by something that existed beyond the boundaries of nature and reason. I'm an old man now, Samuel Hewitt, aged 63, with gray in my beard and pain in my joints. My children are grown. My wife passed 3 years ago from pneumonia. The farm I bought with my savings from the stage, company is paid off, the land producing enough to keep me comfortable in my declining years. But comfort is a relative thing when you're marked by hellhounds. I'm writing this account now because I think it's important that someone knows the truth. Not the sanitized version the Continental Stage Company put in their records. Temporary closure due to unsafe road conditions. But the real story, because Blackwood Pass is still there. And I believe the pack is still there too, waiting. The town where we found refuge, Mayor Blackwood Settlement, doesn't exist anymore. I traveled back there 5 years ago, driven by a need I couldn't explain. When I arrived, I found nothing but ruins. The buildings had been burned, the stone marker in the town square shattered into pieces. The crack I'd noticed all those years ago had finally split it completely. There were no bodies, no signs of what happened to the people who lived there. Just ash and silence, and the feeling of being watched from the tree line. I didn't stay long. Over the years, I've collected stories, newspaper clippings, rumors and whispers from travelers passing through. There have been other disappearances in that region. Wagons found abandoned, horses dead in their traces, passengers simply gone. The authorities blame bandits or wild animals, but I know better. The hellhounds are still hunting. 3 months ago, I received a letter. It came with no return address, written in a hand I hadn't seen in 20 years but recognized immediately. Jack Morrison. The letter was brief. Sam, they found me. After all this time, they finally found me. I see them in the streets of Boston now, wearing human faces but with those same red eyes. They're patient. They're willing to wait decades for the right moment. I'm writing this because I think I'm next. I can feel it coming, that same presence we felt in the pass, pressing down on me, suffocating me even in a city of thousands. If you get this letter, it means I'm gone. Warn the others if you can. Tell Timothy. Find Dutch if he's still alive. Most importantly, Sam, keep watching. Never let your guard down. Never forget what's out there in the darkness. They marked us, and a mark like that doesn't fade with time. It only grows stronger. Your friend, Jack. I never saw Jack again. The Boston papers reported that a man matching his description was found dead in an alley, killed by what authorities called a pack of feral dogs. But I saw the sketch they printed. Those weren't dog tracks around his body. They were too big, too wide, claws too long. After receiving Jack's letter, I tried to find Timothy. His family farm had been abandoned for years. The neighbors said he'd moved west, chasing rumors of gold, but no one knew exactly where. I like to think he's still out there somewhere, still running. But part of me knows the truth. Dutch I never found any trace of. It's like he vanished from the face of the earth after we returned to St. Louis. Maybe that was his intention. Maybe he found some way to hide from them that the rest of us couldn't. Or maybe he was the first one they claimed, and we just never heard about it. The young couple from the coach, I learned their names were Thomas and Elizabeth Whitmore. Both died in a house fire 10 years ago. The fire started in the middle of the night, they said. No explanation for how it began. But witnesses reported hearing howling in the distance just before the flames took hold. The merchant, whose name I learned was Cornelius Pratt, hung himself in his study 7 years after our journey. His suicide note mentioned only one thing. They're in the walls. They're always in the walls, watching, waiting. I can't bear it anymore. The elderly woman, Mrs. Adelaide Crane, died in her sleep, as I mentioned before. I attended her funeral. At the graveside service, while the priest was speaking, I saw something at the edge of the cemetery. A massive shape, darker than the shadows around it, watching from between the tombstones. When I blinked, it was gone. But I knew what I'd seen. One by one, everyone who survived Blackwood Pass has been claimed. Everyone except me. Why? I've asked myself that question 10,000 times. Why am I still here when all the others are gone? What makes me special? Or, and this is the thought that keeps me awake at night, am I not special at all? Am I simply last? 3 nights ago I heard scratching at my door. The same sound I heard on the coach all those years ago. Claws on wood, patient and persistent. I sat in my chair with my father's old rifle across my lap, waiting for dawn. The scratching continued until first light, then stopped. When I opened the door, there were marks in the wood, deep gouges that couldn't have been made by any normal animal. Last night, I heard my wife's voice calling me from outside. My dead wife, calling my name in that same inflection the Hellhounds used in the pass. Samuel, come outside. I'm cold. I need you. I didn't answer. I didn't open the door. I just sat in the darkness, remembering Jack's words. Once marked, we'll never be free. He was right. I'm writing this now because I believe my time is running out. The encounters are becoming more frequent, more bold. The Hellhounds are closing in, and I don't think I'll survive much longer. But before they come for me, I want this story told. I want people to know what's out there, beyond the safe borders of civilization, in those dark places where ancient things still dwell. Places like Blackwood Pass. If you're reading this, please, I beg you, heed this warning. There are roads you should never travel, places you should never go, no matter how much time they promise to save. The shortcuts that seem too good to be true usually are. And if you ever hear voices calling your name from the darkness, voices of loved ones you've lost, don't answer. Don't investigate. Don't try to help, because it's not them. It's never them. It's something old and hungry and patient, wearing familiar faces to lure you into the dark. Some evils can't be defeated. They can only be survived, and sometimes not even that. The scratching at my door has started again. It's only mid-afternoon, but the sun seems dimmer today. The shadows in my house are growing longer, darker, reaching toward me like grasping fingers. I can hear breathing on the other side of the door, heavy, patient, eternal. I'm not afraid anymore. Fear is a young man's emotion, and I'm tired. So very tired of running, of looking over my shoulder, of jumping at every shadow and sound. Maybe this is what they wanted all along. Not our deaths, those were always guaranteed, but our complete surrender. Our acknowledgement that we were never in control, that we never stood a chance against something so ancient and implacable. If that's victory for them, then so be it. I won't give them the satisfaction of begging or pleading or trying to bargain. I'll face whatever comes with my eyes open and my spine straight, the way my father taught me. The scratching has stopped. The door is opening. I see red eyes in the darkness of my doorway. Multiple pairs. The whole pack has come for me. And standing at the front, wearing a face I haven't seen in 40 years, is my brother David. He smiles at me with too many teeth. "Hello, Samuel," he says. "It's time to come home." And maybe he's right. Maybe Blackwood Pass was always meant to be my home. Maybe I died there 20 years ago, and everything since has just been a dream. A ghost's final moments stretched across decades. Or maybe the Hellhounds are just that patient, that cruel, that eternal. I'm setting down my pen now, not because I'm giving up, but because there's nothing more to say. The story ends here, the way all stories end, in darkness and silence and the patient hunger of things that should not be. If you find this account, remember us. Remember what we saw. Remember that there are things in this world older than humanity, darker than death, and hungrier than the grave itself. And whatever you do, never, ever travel through Blackwood Pass, because the Hellhounds are still there, still hunting, still waiting. And now, finally, after 20 years of patience, they've come to collect what's owed. And the final entry in Samuel Hewitt's journal was dated September the 28th, 1861, exactly 20 years to the day after his journey through Blackwood Pass. His body was found 3 days later by a neighbor, sitting in his chair, eyes open, facing the front door. The door was open. There were tracks leading away from the house, massive paw prints pressed deep into the earth, heading west toward the mountains. Toward Blackwood Pass. No investigation was ever conducted. The authorities ruled it death by natural causes. Heart failure, they said. But the neighbor who found him reported something in his statement that was later stricken from the official record. His face, it wasn't scared or pained. He was smiling, like he'd finally found something he'd been looking for all his life. Or like something had finally found him. Samuel Hewitt's journal was discovered in his desk drawer and published posthumously in 1863 as a work of fiction. It was largely ignored. But travelers still avoid Blackwood Pass. They take the long road, even when time is precious. Because some roads aren't worth traveling, no matter how much time they promise to save. And on quiet nights, when the wind howls through the mountains and the shadows grow long, people claim they can still hear it. The sound of howling. Patient, eternal, hungry. The sound of something that will never stop hunting. Never. So what do you think? Do you believe the Hellhounds were truly defeated? Or are they still out there, watching, waiting for their next victims? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more chilling tales from history's darkest corners. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that might just be true.